Hi dear students, my name is Anadolu from Open Education faculty. In this video I'm going to summarize chapter 2 of the course Turkish Politics, which gives us a historical scenery around the establishment of the new Republic of Turkey. To do this chapter looks from the constitutional monarchy of the Ottoman Empire to the multi-party period of the Republic of Turkey. In the first chapter, we discussed the significance of history in the fate of the country as a social and political institution. In that respect, this chapter aims to summarize especially the modernization efforts and the reforms that took place in the last century, in the classical age of the Ottoman Empire, and discuss some major events in the formation of the Republic, and explain how reforms in certain areas tried to transform the Ottoman Empire and also the new Republic and bring it up to 1950s in a historical and chronological manner. Let's talk about the classical age of Ottoman Empire first, and as we said, the historical legacy of the Ottoman Empire is very important for the new Republic and also important for Turkish political life. The classical age of the Ottoman Empire is also significant because it is where the first modernization and westernization efforts was needed. So the ruler, the Sultan, was the center of the administrative structure in this period. After the ruler comes the administrators, and they represent the Sultan's or the ruler's authority. Who are they? They are the soldiers, the bureaucrats, and clergymen. And then we see Reaya, and Reaya consists of peasants, villagers, merchants, and artisans. The principal responsibility of the Ottoman administrative structure was to keep everyone's position in the group and to accomplish the functions of the group without changing. So social mobility was kept to a minimum between groups, and the administrative structure was not open to change. The political system always tried to protect itself from political and radical transformation and always tried to maintain the status quo. What is the status quo like for the classical age of the Ottoman Empire? Let's look at that shortly. In this status quo, economy is based on agriculture. So villagers, in other words, peasants, were the basis of this structure. And for the maintenance of the status quo, the principle of the circle of justice was very important dimension. After the year 1600s, it became very difficult for the Ottoman Empire to maintain the status quo because the Timar system was dissolved. Let's look at why this Timar system had to dissolve. It's because of the corrupted behavior of Sipahis who were in control of peasants' architectural production. And another important factor, of course, in the diminishing power of the empire and the gradual loss of commercial value is the increasingly capitalizing world and the lack of adaptation to this world in the Ottoman Empire. And there was a loss of power. And this loss of power in social, economic, political, and military areas started the disintegration of the classical period of the Ottoman Empire. So there was a need for certain reforms. Reforms became inevitable. There are certain common characteristics of the Ottoman reforms, Ottoman modernization efforts. First of all, they were largely launched in the military areas first. Second, these efforts were also transferred to other problematic areas such as the financial system from the military field. Lastly, most of these efforts aim towards the centralization of the administrative structure. And let's look at these efforts one by one. First of all, we need to talk about the Deed of Alliance. After the dissolution of the Timar system and the ayans becoming highly effective in the system in the 18th century, there was a need to sign a legal document between the ruler and the ayans, because there was a need to organize the relations between the ayans and the sultans. Therefore, in 1808, the Deed of Alliance was signed as a treaty, and the treaty between the ruler and the ayans, the sultan and the ayans, and this is accepted as the first constitutional document in our history. Secondly, as a modernization effort in the classical age of the Ottoman Empire, we see the Edict of Tanzimat. The Edict of Tanzimat was proclaimed in 1839, and it promised 4 basic reforms. The first of all, the edict guarantees life, honors, and property of subjects of the ruler, subjects meaning the riaya, the citizens in the empire. Secondly, a regular taxation system would be formed according to the edict. Thirdly, military service was made compulsory. And fourthly, all subjects would be equal before the law, regardless of religion. So no matter which religion a subject belongs to, all of them would be equal in front of law. Edict of Tanzimat constitutes a very clear example of the Western influence, as it occurred as a consequence of the pressure of the Western countries. It is also significant in the sense that it's the first occasion where the ruler restricted his own powers and authority. When there were problems in implementing the principles of Edict of Tanzimat, a new edict was published, and that's called the Edict of Islahat. The basic purpose of the Edict of Islahat was to fulfill the commitments of the Edict of Tanzimat. Therefore, it included more concrete measures, such as making a budget, opening a bank, and also another important aspect of the Edict of Islahat is that for the first time an ideology was expressed in a legal document, and that was Ottomanism. In what sense? Ottomanism was expressed in this document as it involves the idea of the representation of people for local administrative units for the first time in Ottoman history. And it gave birth to the idea of Ottomanism. And this was the idea of Young Ottomans, which was a secret society that came together under the umbrella of opposition towards the political actors and political practices of the Tanzimat era. Young Ottomans were against the despotism of pashas of the Tanzimat era. They actually wanted to construct a constitutional monarchy, and that's why they were opposing the Tanzimat pashas. Constitutional monarchy was adopted in 1876 by Abdülhamit II because young Ottomans became more powerful, and the name of that was Kanuni Esasi, as you know. Elections were held, and also the first Ottoman parliament was convened in March 1877. However, because of the Russian conflict, the parliament was suspended shortly after. The reign of Abdülhamit II is both characterized with a variety of reforms, especially in communication and in transportation fields, but also with the emergence of a lot of fundamental problems such as oppression, bribery, and favoritism, and all of which caused the corruption of the empire. After Young Ottomans, we can talk about another important society, which is Young Turks, because there were a lot of educational reforms in the Abdülhamit II era. Due to these educational reforms, a new group of opposition was formed, and they were consisting of well-educated and Western type educated bureaucrats. And they were all against the administration of Abdülhamit II. Okay, what did they want? Young Turks actually wanted the parliament and the constitution to be readopted. You know, it was suspended because of the Russian conflict. When Abdülhamit took strict measures against Young Turks, the movement almost collapsed. They had to go to the Balkans. But then another question, the Macedonian question, sparkled in 1908, and it triggered the 1908 revolution. In 1908 revolution, Young Turks pressed Abdülhamit to restore the constitution, and it worked. They were successful. After that, after the revolution, they worked as a political community rather than a secret organization, and they worked under the name of the Committee of Union and Progress, İttihat ve Terakki Cemiyeti, as we would say in Turkish. İTC became highly influential in controlling the parliament and the administrative system after the 1908 revolution, which we call the second constitutional period, actually. In the second constitutional period, the 31st of March incident took place, which resulted in an increase in the power of İTC. The developments that led to the loss of great lands from the Ottoman Empire also took place in this period. Finally, with the First World War and being a part of it together with Germany, brought the end of the empire. A new state was established after the War of Independence, and the Ottoman Empire became history. After the proclamation of the Republic, Atatürk wanted to start a comprehensive transformation project, which included westernization, of course, and for this he needed the support of a powerful political party, and that is why he established the People's Party, and a reform period began. One-party period is largely characterized by a wide range of political, social, economic policy reforms, and the most comprehensive efforts in the Turkish modernization history. The creation of a nation-state was certainly the center of these reforms, and the concept of citizen was brought instead of the concept of a subject and reaya. And the influence of religion on political and social areas was diminished because of secularization policies. Although there were some opposition attempts in this period, the government closed their way due to their links with the Sheikh Said rebellion. And we can say that during this period, the fundamental ideology of the Republic became Kemalism, which we mentioned in chapter 1. Reforms in language, history, and economy were adopted to increase the power of this ideology. One of the most significant aspects of 1930s was the identification of the party, the People's Party, with the state. After changed its name to Republican People's Party, of course, which we would still call CHP. After Atatürk's loss, İsmet İnönü was elected as the president, and during his time, both the changing world system and the Second World War And other internal dissatisfactions led to the beginning of the multi-party period. And in 1945, National Development Party was established, and later Democrat Party was established, and the latter of which would win the elections against CHP in 1950. Thank you.